Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. We have 15 weeks of the NFL season in the books, and we are going to be recapping all the Week 15 NFL action for you in this week's or in today's episode. But first, we are going to start by looking at the playoff action for the Show League. We had myself and John Hamlin for the top seeds, so we had buys this week, but there were two big games. In the first of those, Matt Bruning, who made the playoffs, was going against Sloopy Lou. Sloopy Lou got the win by about 11 points, and he will get to play me in the semifinals. Looking forward to that. But Dennis, you had definitely a very personal stake in the other quarterfinal matchup. Why don't you break that one down for us?
So it was tense in the Bennett household. In this playoff matchup, it was my wife versus my sister-in-law. And going into Sunday night, they each had two players left. And I forget who their Sunday night players were. But they ended up Sunday night about 1.5 points apart. And going into Monday Night Football, my wife had DK Metcalf and Beth had Tyler Lockett. It was crazy. And I'm like, this should be a DK game. He should be able to get it. And then it seemed like he just couldn't get it going. And Lockett was getting a few catches, not a lot of yards, but he was getting a few catches. At one point, Beth was up by about 8 or 9 points. And Jackie's like, yeah, I think it's over. You know, she's looking at the percentages. And I'm like, just hold on. You know, they're going to have to come back. DK's there. That catch DK Metcalf made down the sideline in double coverage is the one that clinched the game for her. I was so excited. I mean, I was excited for her, but I was really excited for me because in another league, I was playing and my guys were all done. And I had a 26-point lead. And my opponent had Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks going, who their average on the season, if they hit their average, I would have won by 0.1 of a point. Their projections, I would have won by about 4 points. And they were racking up tackles and points in the first half. I was sweating it. I'm out there. I had never been such a big Drew Lock fan in my entire life. And I'm cheering, Drew, come on, just no big plays, just first downs, no big plays to keep that defense off the field. I won by 1.8 points. I went 2-4 this weekend. I had 2 buys, so I had 4 of my 8 playoff teams advancing to next weekend. Now Jackie and I are spending the next 2 days with fingers crossed, hoping there's no stat corrections that get us.
Yeah, I didn't do too bad. I have quite a few teams that advanced. I think I have 13 left going. My biggest surprise is I am still alive in the Scott Fish Bowl. I think this is the furthest I've ever gone. This is either the 4th or 5th time I've done it now, making it to the semifinals. I don't know how much magic I have left. I think 250 advanced. I was number 233 getting into the semifinals. But Christian McCaffrey, he has been a wonder and an MVP for the 49ers. He has been a wonder and an MVP for my Scott Fish Bowl team as well. Looking forward to seeing how the games shake out in Week 16, and hopefully some of the bigger players will have better weeks. we will look at some of the poor showings we had now as we recap week 15. And we're going to start. Dennis and I were with you doing the preview on Thursday this week, and that meant we hadn't yet seen the Thursday night football game. And what a football game it was, as the Chargers came to battle the Raiders. And it wasn't much of a battle. 21-0 Raiders after one quarter, 42-0 at the half, 63-21. Ends up being Brandon Staley. We've made jokes about, will this be the game that cost Staley his job for weeks now? This finally was the one. He and Tom Telesco, the GM, let go on Friday. So Dennis, 5-9, the Chargers are out of it this season. Justin Herbert is done for the rest of the year. They don't have a particularly easy schedule. But where do you think they go from here?
So looking over their staff, I really don't see anybody on their staff that's going to step up and be a candidate to keep the job. So it's not only are they cleaning house at the head coach and GM position. I don't know. Kellen Moore is probably the most high-profile candidate, and 2 years ago he was hot stuff. But
they grabbed a coach I've never heard of to be the interim. Kind of tells you if Kellen Moore was serious consideration, I think he would have gotten it.
Yeah, it's so there's really nobody on staff. They close with they're at Buffalo at home, they're at Denver, and then Kansas City at home. Those are all games that I think are going to give them problems unless they play over their heads. We could be looking at a 5-12 team, and going into next year, Eckler's a free agent, and I don't see any reason that they're going to want to re-sign him. He's been terrible this year. Keenan, he still has 1 year and $11.4 million in dead cap. Mike Williams has 1 year, $12.4 million in dead cap, and Josh Palmer has 1 year and $250,000. So if I had to guess, I'd say Palmer's definitely going to stay. I imagine they let Mike Williams go, coming off the injury. They're going to probably try to keep Keenan.
I think they're going to try to trade Mike Williams. I saw some talk about that. I'm curious too, in this game, I know it was a blowout, but they finally not only had Isaiah Spiller active, he got 16 carries. I'll be curious to see if they give him more run here down kind of a meaningless stretch. He was an interesting name going into the draft. It was an interesting landing spot. We have not seen him do anything to this point, but as you mentioned, Austin Eckler has struggled mightily, and Joshua Kelly certainly doesn't look like the dude there.
Yeah, he's he just hit the wall. I understand it. That's why he wanted to get his money. He knew I'm a 28-year-old undersized running back who's been getting a lot of volume.
Meanwhile, for the Raiders, there is talk Antonio Pierce, who's their interim head coach, could get a shot at the big job. But I want to talk about Aiden O'Connell. He's gotten a long runway audition here. Obviously, the week before, the Raiders scored 0 points. Wasn't too impressive. But on Thursday night, 4 touchdowns. He's been a little bit up and down, but what do you think are the chances that he gets a shot next year?
So with him, yeah, he doesn't have anything to lose. He was, I think a 4th or a 5th round pick, and he wasn't really expected to play this year. So if he wants a shot, he's going to have to make some plays. He's completing 63% of his passes. He's got an 8-7 touchdown to interception ratio. So I expect he's going to get veteran competition that's not named Jimmy Garoppolo. But the new head coach and GM are really going to decide what to do as far as the quarterback position goes. And they don't, right now they're playing well enough and winning enough games that they're going to be out of the first tier of quarterbacks. And then will they want to go with one of those second tiers in the first round? They've got lots of holes in that team. The big question for me is what are they going to do with Devontae Adams? He's got 2 years, $44 million in dead cap. They'd love to trade him, but with those kind of numbers, I don't think they're going to be able to get real good return for him. Josh Jacobs is a free agent, so he's probably gone. And then Jacoby Myers with 2 years at $6.8 million in dead cap. I think he's going to end up being the guy unless he gets pouty and pushes his way out.
Yeah, going to be very interesting. I think a lot of it's going to hinge on who they end up making their coach. There's still those persistent rumors that John Gruden might be back in the mix. I guess it's going to be a fun off season. It's more fun for me because I'm not a huge Las Vegas Raiders fan. We had a trio of games on Saturday. All of them had very big relevance for the playoff picture. In the first one, the Minnesota Vikings traveled to Cincinnati. They built a pretty big lead, but the Bengals came storming back, got the 27-24 win in overtime. The Vikings changed quarterbacks, went with Nick Mullins this week. 26-33, 303 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Do you think that was really an upgrade over what they were getting from Dobbs?
So Dobbs's edge was improvising and being able to run, but Dobbs also hit a rut where he started making poor decisions. And for whatever reason, to be fair, I like Josh Dobbs' story, but over his career, we're in the typical Josh Dobbs arc. He comes in, not expected to do anything, plays well for a couple games, and then he starts making questionable decisions. So I don't think Mullins is a long-term upgrade either. He started 16 games over 3 years. If he was a long-term upgrade, he probably wouldn't have went another year and a half or 2 years before he got this starting opportunity. I think his last game he started was in Cleveland last year, the year before. But, in this game, he had a 9.18 yard per attempt, which is good. The 2 touchdowns is good. Interceptions, sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. But he got the ball to the guys that we want him to get the ball to. And if I'm the head coach, I want him to get the ball to Jefferson and Hockenson and Addison too. And then you add on top of it Ty Chandler coming in and really making us forget Alexander Mattison.
Didn't take much given Madison's production this year. For the Bengals, T. Higgins, it's not been a great season for him, but he had a couple incredible catches in that comeback. One of them, one of the better touchdown catches of the year. He's coming into kind of an interesting off season. Could be a huge factor this week with Jamar Chase ailing. What do you think the long-term future is for Higgins? Do you think he stays in Cincinnati or gets a shot to be number one somewhere else?
I think he's going to go because he wants the shot to be the number one. He's going into his second contract. He's had some good games. I think he showed his rookie season that he could be a number one. Can he be a top 12, not for fantasy, but a top 12, top 15 wide receiver in the league? Maybe, but I don't think he's a top 10 guy. He has some lapses in concentration. And, what I want to see out of him is, can he produce consistently? Even in this game, he only put up 61 yards and he only caught 50% of the passes thrown to him, but he put up 2 touchdowns, which that's what you're looking for. Teams I think that he could go to be the 1 or the 1A, New England, they're always looking for a wide receiver. Lord knows they can't draft one. The Las Vegas Raiders.
They better find a quarterback. I mean, T. Higgins will help, but they got to have a passer too.
If Devontae Adams leaves and they can save some money with Higgins, that would be good. Carolina is looking for, Adam Thielen isn't the alpha. Jonathan Mingo is a, he's a rookie who's played like a rookie. They need to get weapons for their rookie quarterback. He went to school in Clemson, not too far away. I think he's actually from Tennessee or Kentucky. The Giants, they need a receiver. Tennessee, he's from Tennessee. They could, DeAndre Hopkins. We haven't seen a whole lot out of Treylon Burks yet. And then, for all that we've seen out of this Houston Texans receiver core, I would dare say if you put T. Higgins on that team, he's better than Nico Collins.
Be interesting to see where he ends up. He's also probably tracking to be a fantastic play this week. Jamar Chase, shoulder injury. We'll know more when we do our Friday preview, but it looks like he will miss week 16, kind of big for the Bengals. The next Saturday game saw the Pittsburgh Steelers travel to battle the Indianapolis Colts. They led 13-0 and lost 30-13. Dennis, 3 straight losses for the Steelers. Mitch Trubisky hasn't looked good. They're turning it over to Mason Rudolph. They are now pretty well long shots in the playoffs after being in potentially the 5th seed a few weeks ago. Are they kind of fading out of the playoff race for you?
Yeah, I think so. Mason Rudolph is not your savior. I mean, it's when you miss on the quarterback, it's tough, and it takes a little time to recover. You can say, oh well, Pickett was injured and that's it. But I think we've seen enough out of Pickett to know he's not an elevator. He is a game. He's Jimmy Garoppolo. He's a game manager. He needs to have everything right around him: offensive line, exceptional skill position players. Could Pickett go to San Francisco and produce? I'm sure he could. They've got an excellent scheme and lots of excellent weapons. But he's not going to be able to lift a team up and do it. The run game is struggling. They've had fewer than 90 rush yards in 5 of their last 7 games, and 41 and 55 yards in their last 2. It's just when you don't have any balance, whether it's Pickett or Rudolph or Trubisky, the team is not going to be successful for real life wins and losses or for fantasy.
Meanwhile, for the Colts, they got the win, but they got beat up in the process. Michael Pittman got knocked out with an injury. So too did Zach Moss, and that opened the door for Trey Sermon, now on his 3rd NFL team, to get kind of his first shot at real meaningful regular season snaps. 17 carries, 88 yards. What did you think of Sermon?
So I have a soft spot for him because he's a Buckeye, but I think Sermon is just a Jag. He's a deep dynasty stash. He's one of those guys you want to put on your bench just in case stuff like this happens. It's you hope that he ends up getting an opportunity, but he's a free agent. Moss only has 30,000 in dead cap, and I don't think Moss is good either. So they're both fighting for a shot to be the backup to Jonathan Taylor. He's got good size at 6'1", 215, and he had a really good relative athletic score. Shout out to Kent Lee Platt at MathBomb on Twitter. His RAS score was 9.67 out of 10. So he's a good athlete. Just sometimes with some players, that doesn't translate into being a productive NFL player. And I think, too, there's a little bit of, I don't want to say an attitude problem with Sermon, but the professionalism doesn't always click with him.
Well, the 3rd game on Saturday was great for Dennis and heartbreaking for me as we exchanged some texts while I was trying to open presents with my family. The present I didn't get was a performance from the Denver Broncos, who went to Detroit and got walked in a 42-17 loss. Dennis, much like the Steelers, Denver takes a big hit in the pack of tightly grouped AFC teams competing for the playoffs. They took a pretty big step back. How do you feel about their playoff chances?
Well, why don't you tell me? Is this growing pains in the Sean Payton system?
I was most alarmed probably by, the defense early in the season was a rumor. And I was very concerned that they seemed to pull themselves together. Defense on Saturday night once again seemed to be something of a rumor. And also, you and I changed texts about this. I do not understand how they did not challenge one or both of those goal line plays. Would it have changed? Would it have won the game? I don't know, but it certainly was a pivotal moment to just let 2 plays that even the announcers calling it live are saying it looks like they're touchdowns slide by. I don't know if Denver has enough offense. They have an incredibly favorable schedule, though. They have Patriots, Chargers, Raiders to close out. If they win all 3 games, I think they have a chance. I've said before, I think 10 wins and you have a shot. But the AFC is pretty crowded, and there is a lot of moving pieces. It's going to be a spectacular 3 weeks down the stretch. We have 3 teams tied to top the AFC South. Buffalo's making a big surge back on Miami in the East. You have 3 teams that are really vying for it in the North. There's going to be a lot of fun things that happen, and there's going to be a couple of great AFC teams that don't make the playoffs that would have made it in the NFC.
Yeah, I honestly I expected a little more out of the Broncos, and not just because I roster Wilson, Williams, and Sutton.
Well, flipping it around for you, though, the Lions had been in a little bit of a rough patch, but Jared Goff, no turnovers, threw 5 touchdowns. They got the passing game clicking, the running game going really well. They have a pretty tough closing stretch, Vikings, Cowboys, Vikings, but 10-4, they're tied for the second best record in the NFC. Are you feeling more encouraged about the Lions?
I am. They've been playing inconsistent and largely beating the teams that they should. Atlanta, Tampa Bay, Denver, and barely beating teams that, beating some teams they should, barely beating other teams, the Chargers, Chicago, New Orleans, and losing teams to teams that they should have won, Seattle, Green Bay, Chicago. So while their overall record looks good, there's definitely some chinks in the armor. They've got good players. Goff is QB8 for fantasy. Gibbs is RB9 with 2 games missed. Montgomery's RB20 with 3 games missed. Amon-Ra St. Brown's wide receiver 5. And Laporta, everybody's All-American, tight end 3. So they have players, and they've got some defensive playmakers. They just haven't been consistent.
Moving on to the Sunday games, the Chicago Bears traveled to play the Cleveland Browns. Browns held on for the 20-17 victory, actually come from behind victory, and they narrowly dodged what was almost a fantastic Hail Mary from Justin Fields there at the end.
Can't do better. He dropped it right in Mooney's belly. I heard him call glass.
The Bears, it was a tough defense here. They're not getting a ton out of the running game. Fields was okay. Both of his interceptions coming on end of half Hail Marys. The receivers came out this week, both Mooney and DJ Moore, seeming to make the case that they would believe that Justin Fields is their guy moving forward. How do you feel about him and the Bears offense?
So I'm a Bears fan because of Justin Fields, and he's got the second highest sack rate behind Daniel Jones at 11.1%. So, we love to talk about how Sam Howell gets sacked a lot, but Howell is 5th in sack rate. So Fields has to get rid of the ball quicker. And some of the issues he has is because he is such a good athlete and he is big. He's 6'3", 230 pounds. So you've got this big, strong, fast guy back there. And so he thinks he can make plays, and he does frequently, but other times he doesn't. And sometimes he doesn't read the defense very well, and he gets caught, whether it's by a blitz or on a stunt. And so he ends up not being as productive as you would like. I think the real issue is that it doesn't seem like the coaching staff believes in him. He was there a year before they got there. And I think what their approach is going to be, hey, we need to get our guy in here, to keep their job. So look, we got it. He can do some things, but he doesn't really fit our system. We've been trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Let's move him and get some additional draft capital to go with the great draft capital we already have. We can get our own guy in here that's going to fit our system and make the plays we need for him to make. I whether that's going to work or not, you don't know. It's a crapshoot in the draft, even for people in the NFL that do it all the time. So I'd like to see Fields stay, but I think there's enough teams that need quarterbacks. I think I heard somebody I thought I saw something where there were some players, I think on the Raiders, Mitchell Renz had posted something. I didn't read all of it, but saying that there were players on the Raiders that were stumping for the Raiders to trade for Justin Fields.
Again, I think it's going to be interesting for a lot of these teams too, where we need to see how many more coaches shuffle and change hands. You could even have some of these established franchises where people have been there a long time, like New England or Pittsburgh, changing coaches. We could see quite a bit of movement this off season. Meanwhile, the Browns moved to 9-5. They are the 5th seed in the AFC. The AFC is looking kind of wide open, but the Browns have been an incredible story onto their backup running back, onto their fourth quarterback, but they have that great defense. How far do you think they can go in the playoffs?
At some point, the clock's going to strike midnight, and it's those orange helmets are going to turn back into pumpkins. I love the story. They're on their fourth quarterback, their second running back, their second left tackle, their third right tackle. I'm hopeful and I'm pulling for them. But there's a big gap between, mid to high RB1 Nick Chubb and low RB2 Jerome Ford. And while the quarterback play is improving now with Flacco, it isn't like Flacco's out there completing 70% of his passes with a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. He's making plays, but there's definitely, he threw more interceptions than touchdowns this week. It's great when you're winning, but he's a 40-year-old quarterback with no mobility. He's making decisions and he's getting the ball out. Can that defense carry them? Some weeks I think yes. Other weeks I think, it's maybe not.
It's going to be interesting to see. They have a good tough test in week 16 when they go to Houston too. The Green Bay Packers hosted the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers came away with the victory 34-20 on Sunday. Dennis Baker Mayfield went into Lambeau Field and posted a perfect quarterback rating as the Buccaneers remain in first place in the NFC South. Are they peaking at the right time?
So, my grandpa always used to say, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. Baker, he does this sometimes. He has really good games. He makes all the right decisions. It really helped that Rachaad White, who has struggled on the ground most of the season, the last couple of weeks has ran the ball very well, along with being productive in the passing game. Chris Godwin, now that Mike Evans seems to have gotten his 1,000 yards, Baker only has eyes for Chris Godwin. Evans still had 6 targets.
I was going to say he actually supported 3 fantasy. We didn't know if he could do it, but 2 receivers and a running back.
Well, and 3 receivers if you count David Moore breaking off a 52-yarder for a touchdown. So it's, sometimes the sun and the moon and the planets and the stars all line up just perfectly, and you have a game where you put up a perfect passer rating. So can they have a shot at 10-7? They close out with Jacksonville and New Orleans at home and then at Carolina. So they've got as good a shot as anybody else in that division.
Meanwhile, for the Packers, they're now 6-8, continuously battling injuries, inefficiency, and just some curious plays. They don't have the easiest schedule to close the season either. Are they running out of magic?
So that team is so young. I think they're a year ahead of schedule anyways. So to expect a ton out of the Packers, I don't think was realistic. They have 3 winnable games, but honestly, it's probably better for them to not win. They should win at Carolina. Minnesota could go either way. Chicago at home could go either way. They've got good young players at quarterback, wide receiver, tight end. They need to overhaul the running back position. I don't think A.J. Dillon comes back. I know that Jones has another year on his contract. Maybe they keep him around as a veteran presence, but they're going to need to bring in, somebody to tote the rock there.
Next up, it was Battle of the AFC South as the Houston Texans traveled to play the Tennessee Titans, who were actually in their Houston Oilers throwback uniforms, which was the subject of a lot of discussion before, during, and after the game. The Titans led for most of the way, but then the fighting Case Keenums came all the way back and got a 19-16 victory. Dennis, now Houston 8-6, tied atop the AFC South. How big was this win for the Texans?
It's huge. Anytime that you can win a game without your MVP candidate quarterback and your dynamic rookie wide receiver and Tank Dell, with Nico Collins out, you'll take it. And you just want to, this team is starting to gel. It sounds like it feels like they believe in the message DeMeco Ryans is putting out. And it feels like because CJ Stroud is bought in and he believes in Bobby Slowick's system, they've all kind of clicked. And it was a little surprising that they went with
Case Keenum instead of Davis Mills.
Instead of Davis Mills. But hey, it worked. And so, for me, I think that they've developed depth. They've got Noah Brown. They've got a veteran presence in Robert Woods. Xavier Hutchinson, with people injured, has been playing a lot of snaps. Brown is a free agent. I feel like he's earned a shot to come back and be the wide receiver 3 on this team, battle with Hutchinson for that wide receiver 3 spot. And the same with Devin Singletary. He's come on and put up a great season so far. I was thinking back last year, I was in a Twitter beef with somebody because I happened to refer to Dameon Pierce as a hashtag 2 to 3 year window. And they were like,
been a hashtag 12 to 14 months.
They were like, how could I? And and I kind of showed like, hey, people drafted where he is, who didn't have a lot of college production. This is how they typically turn out. And they were like, well, how many of them won the starting job? And I was like, well, none. But based on
Michael Carter.
I get it. Congratulations. Hashtag 2 to 3 year window. I pettily tweeted that tweet back at them today. So
yeah, it feels good, doesn't it?
It does.
The Titans, meanwhile, got eliminated officially from the playoffs. A young group with some players coming forward. I want to ask you about Treylon Burks. Coming to the end of year 2, we didn't see much as a rookie. Hasn't really done a lot this year. Did have 3 for 62 on 3 targets in this game. How do you feel about him going forward?
I'm cautiously optimistic. He flashes some real good athleticism. He's a big guy. He can run pretty well. I'd like to see him and Levis continue to develop chemistry over these last 3 games. He caught all 3 of his targets for 62 yards this week. Levis kind of underperformed with no touchdowns and only 199 yards. So, but I mean, that whole kind of offense kind of did. But I would like to see him and Levis develop some chemistry. I don't know how long DeAndre Hopkins is going to be there. I don't know how long he should be there. I think Derrick Henry's out the door. I think next year we're looking at Burks and Tyjae Spears and Will Levis as the core of that offense. Nick Westbrook-Akini will do some. Chigo Okonkwo will be there. He's averaging 15.4 yards a catch. That's up a couple yards from what he did last season, but he's only catching 50% of his passes. So I get it. You're deep down the field. Those are harder to catch, but you want to get that up and, towards 60 and if even as a big play threat.
Next up, the Jets travel to play the Dolphins. No Tyreek Hill, but no problem. Miami getting the 30-0 victory. After a mammoth game in Week 14, Zach Wilson came back to earth. 4 of 11, 26 yards, got knocked out with a concussion. How do we feel about Zach Wilson going forward? Been some rumblings that they may try to trade him. The quarterback landscape is not incredible in the NFL. How are you feeling about him?
So it's a bad pick that just keeps looking worse. He's probably a very nice person, and he's a handsome devil. But, he can't feel pressure in the pocket. He makes poor decisions with the ball. When he's perfectly clean, can he throw the ball a mile accurately? Yeah, he can. But he just doesn't seem to be able to. He doesn't. The things he's not good at don't feel like things you can learn. They feel like things you either have or you don't, and he seems to don't.
Certainly seems true. The Dolphins, meanwhile, they lost a tough one in Week 14 on Monday night to the Titans. Come back here, no Tyreek Hill, but they looked pretty dominant on defense, and their offense got really going. Good game for Waddle, good game on the ground. Is this an encouraging sign for the Dolphins as we move toward the stretch run?
Any games that you can win without Tyreek Hill, and with Tua only putting up 224-1 are good games. So we were talking before we started the show. In a one quarterback league this week, I actually sat Tua for Nick Mullins. Now I made a colossal error and selected Josh Dobbs instead of Nick Mullins, but I still ended up pulling it out by 1.8 points. Mullins was the right choice there. He scored 20.5 points to Tua's 15.3 or something like that. So that was the right choice going up against the New York Jets defense. I want to see Tua, he got a couple turnovers, put him in good position. I want to see him, continue to do well if Tyreek is out. Sometimes when they're down to just one of those dynamic playmakers, it feels like he starts to force the ball too much. And whether that's because he doesn't trust Braxton Berrios or Chase Claypool or Cedric Wilson enough, I get it, especially with Claypool. But Durham Smythe had 4 targets. I don't think the tight ends have had 4 targets all year.
I honestly forgot they traded for Claypool. He's on his 3rd team where he's managed to do nothing.
Correct.
Next up, the Kansas City Chiefs traveled to play the New England Patriots, got the 27-17 victory. Isaiah Pacheco missed his 2nd straight game, had shoulder surgery last week. They're hoping he's going to return to practice, but no lock that he is available to play. Week 1 with him out there, they didn't have much in the backfield. Week 2, we saw some good things from Jerick McKinnon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They each caught a passing touchdown. McKinnon actually threw a touchdown. Are you feeling better about that backfield if Pacheco misses time?
Not really. McKinnon had a great December run last year. And if you're putting him in your lineup, you're hoping that they're recreating the magic of last year. Edwards-Helaire, yeah, he had a 48-yard touchdown run. That was great. But McKinnon or Pacheco, the way that passing game is working, they need Pacheco to be able to get the tough running yards. He's got so much more juice than Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and he catches the ball surprisingly well to where they don't have to – you don't look at it every time they put McKinnon in, you're like, oh, they're going to pass the ball now. Now they pass the ball probably more. Their pass run ratio is, I think, the widest in the league. But can they get by with him? Yes. But on that team that I accidentally started Josh Dobbs instead of Nick Mullins that advanced to next week, I need Isaiah Pacheco back this week. So let's get her done.
Yeah, they haven't really been very specific about what shoulder surgery, but when you see a guy had surgery on his shoulder, it's hard to imagine he's going to be back in less than 7 days, but I guess stranger things have happened.
He was running back 10 going in before he went out with his injury.
And I didn't even realize, that game, the last game he played in, he actually got ejected. So I don't think I even realized he got hurt in that game because he got ejected for throwing a punch. I thought that was the reason he left. Meanwhile, not a lot fun to talk about with the Patriots offensively or defensively, but we did see running back Kevin Harris get in the game, actually got 4 carries for 25 yards and a touchdown. Any interest in him long term?
Probably rather have Trey Sermon. He's a bruising back with good explosiveness and very little agility. He can run straight ahead. He doesn't catch the ball well. I think it was Lance Zierlein who, in the appraisal of Kevin Harris when he was coming into the league, characterized his pass catching abilities is he treats the ball like it's lava. So he doesn't catch the ball well. But I feel like this was more of a like we can't give Zeke every touch again this week. We got to give it to somebody else. I get it. He got in the end zone. He averaged 6.3 yards, but
most of it was on one carry, to be fair. The New York Giants traveled to New Orleans. Saints got the 24-6 victory. Dennis, it's been a roller coaster with Tommy DeVito, but seems like the shine's coming off a little bit. Tyrod Taylor is back active, actually got into this game a little bit. Do you think we might see Tyrod Taylor going forward, or do you think we'll stick with DeVito?
I think they'll stick with DeVito until he has another kind of meltdown game like this. And I say meltdown, meaning they just weren't putting up offense. Again, another backup quarterback that's a good story. And Tyrod is just such he's been in the league for so long, and it seems like he just can never catch a break when he gets an opportunity to be the starter. He's either getting his lung punctured by the doctor, or the team is just so bad that it doesn't matter that he's the starter. And it just, and to be fair, this Giants team ain't good.
No, he did have one of the better Giants starts of the year, though, earlier in the season when he came in for Daniel Jones' first time. For the Saints, probably the biggest blow was that Chris Olave ended up being a game day inactive. That was a real bummer for a few of my teams. Hopefully he will be able to get himself right since they play on a short week. But Saints, that Derek Carr threw for 3 touchdowns. They got 24 points. They were able to win pretty convincingly. Is this a promising sign for a Saints team that has sputtered some?
I don't know. Alvin Kamara is productive. I mean, he's really, if you want one player off of this offense right now, it's Kamara. And honestly, I think you want to get Taysom Hill back active again. He needs, because of his versatility, I think you can stick him at tight end and get all the different run, pass, catch options that he provides in that area. Jamal Williams showed a little bit. Zach Evans. He's not there. It's not Evans. They've got?
Kendre Miller.
Kendre Miller.
He was out again with injury. Yeah. He's been out a lot.
The crazy thing is, how did Lynn Bowden all of a sudden become like a good receiver in New Orleans?
Kendre Miller is one of those picks that's going to be an interesting one to look back on. I don't, maybe he gets more of a year or two chance, but there was a lot of hype for him in rookie drafts, and we have not seen him do anything.
Yeah, I would have expected with Olave out, I would have thought that A.T. Perry would get a little more run than he did. He only had 2 targets, caught both of them. Lynn Bowden had 5 targets. Foster Moreau had 5 targets. And now don't get me wrong, I'm all for the Foster Moreau targets. Not that anybody's starting him yet, but I liked him when he came out.
The Olympus game of the entire weekend was the Atlanta Falcons at the Carolina Panthers. The Falcons, who are allegedly fighting for a division title and have some of the most exciting fantasy assets on their roster, managed a whopping 7 points against the now 2-win Carolina Panthers, who got the 9-7 victory. Dennis, is Atlanta fading? They're benching Desmond Ridder again, even though a few weeks ago, I swear, Arthur Smith said they were putting Ridder back for the rest of the season. Now, going back to Heineke, does it make a difference?
So this is clearly a deflection to get people to realize that it's Desmond Ridder's fault that the Falcons only gave the ball to Bijan Robinson 8 times. It had to be Desmond. It was Desmond's fault for giving it to Tyler Algier 14 times, for not targeting Bijan, for giving it to Cordero Patterson 5 times. I don't know. This seems like Ridder is escaped. I don't know that. I honestly, if you had to ask me right now, is Ridder the answer at quarterback there? I'm going to say no. But if you know what he is, you only let him throw the ball 20 times. And maybe you thought, it's Carolina, for God's sakes. Put it up 40 times against Carolina.
Well, and the big thing we talked about on our Friday preview on Thursday, is that Carolina was ghastly against running backs. You should have been able to be pounding them with Algier and Robinson. And you're right, I guess they did try to run 31 times, but good Lord.
You got to run it with the right guy, man.
Meanwhile, for the Panthers, this is the third straight game with 80 or more yards for Chuba Hubbard as the lead running back. Do you like him going forward into 2024?
So he's the leader in the clubhouse. Miles Sanders has been ineffective. Even this game, 6 carries for 2 yards. Hubbard caught the ball well, 2 for 2 for 16. He's got 2 years left on his contract, and he's really cheap, so he isn't going anywhere. The new regime will have plenty of other problems to solve, so we're going to keep this guy, and as long as he's a scheme fit, he's 58.6% successful running in a man zone and 47% successful running in a man scheme and 47% successful running in a zone scheme. And that's a minimum of 60 carries. He's 5th in man scheme and 28th in zone. So if whoever the new coach that comes in runs a man blocking scheme, Hubbard should be able to build on the success he's having this year. Now I get it. Teams run both concepts. I know, don't get mad at me in the comments, but that's where Hubbard is successful. So can he be? He's probably not a second contract guy, but he's going to have a couple years being cheap on the payroll to earn it.
Next up, the Rams played the Commanders, got the 28-20 victory. It wasn't even really that close until Jacoby Brissett came in late and led a couple of scoring drives for the Commanders. Do you think we'll see Brissett more going forward, or you think it'll go back to Howell?
I think they've already said they're going back to Howell. They don't want to win, and Howell is going to play hard. He's young. Brissett is a decent quarterback, but even he only completed about 45% of his passes and had an interception. So Howell had 2 interceptions. It wasn't.
Brissett was 8 for 10 for 124 yards and 2 touchdowns.
I had him flipped in my eyes here. So I like Brissett. I think he should get a shot, but I think he's running out of time. I don't know that he's a guy. He's at best a bridge quarterback right now, and he picked a terrible situation to go to. You saw that they had a young quarterback. It was clear they were going to give an opportunity to. He needed to go somewhere where he had an opportunity to compete. I don't think he had an opportunity to compete for the starting job in Washington.
Yeah, certainly didn't look like it. I saw one of the pundits say, even though they're only 7-7, the Rams are one of the most dangerous teams going into the NFC playoffs because of the way they're all coming together with Kupp and Nacua and Kyren Williams back healthy. Do you agree?
So the Rams have 3 phenomenal fantasy weapons. Kyren Williams is, RB8 on the season, and that's with missing 4 games. So he just keeps putting up numbers. He had such a bad combine that and then whatever his injury was last year, I'm not sure what it was, but he was out all year. And then he comes in this year. You hear some rumblings in camp that he's going to be the guy. And you're like, really? This unathletic, slow guy that's 200 pounds. And then he just is a world beater. He looks great in every facet of the game. Cooper Kupp, he's wide receiver 18 on the year since week 5. He's playing well. Puka's wide receiver 11. amazingly enough, Stafford is only quarterback 16 with those wide receivers producing like that. So I would have expected Stafford to be, closer to a wide receiver one, but I'm riding Kupp and Puka and Kyron Williams to playoff wins.
Yeah, and I think in the current landscape, especially with the way they're going, I do like Stafford as a fringe QB1 for the rest of this season.
I think you have to if you've got three quarterbacks, he's a guy you can play matchups with.
Next up, the San Francisco 49ers battled the Arizona Cardinals, got the 45-29 victory. Yeah. It was a lot closer than I was expecting for a lot more of the game than I was expecting. 45-29 victory there for San Francisco. For the Cardinals, James Conner, 14 for 86 and a touchdown. Amari DiMercato got involved, 64 yards and a touchdown on the ground. They got Michael Carter involved, got a few carries, getting catches. What do you make of this suddenly, option-rich backfield for the Cardinals?
I think it's the least of their worries going forward. They've Jonathan Gannon. He's got three running backs that, they've got some varying skills. DeMarcado's a kind of mid-sized guy. Carter's a smaller guy. And Connor's a big bruiser that can actually play in all three phases of the game. So they have the potential to be a really, really big headache for fantasy based on what their game script is. So they've got some good players, but Kyler, 5.41 yards per attempt, 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles. You can't have games like that very often and hope to win. Hollywood being out, it seems like Hollywood and Kyler's kind of pairing seems to be going as well as Derek Carr and Devontae Adams' pairing was. I'd say Aaron Rodgers and Adams.
Carr and Adams put up some huge numbers. They got pulled apart by their coach.
Right. So to me, it didn't go well. I mean,
well, I wouldn't even. That's not even comparable. Hollywood Brown, I would like to see him actually have a reasonable game with Kyler Murray as his quarterback. We haven't seen it in 2 years.
Fair enough.
I mean, Adams was wide receiver 3 last year.
What was Carr?
Carr was he was a top 12 quarterback in fantasy before they benched him. I think missing the 2 or 3 games at the end of the season didn't help much. But I mean, we've seen that grand plan from Josh McDaniels has worked out so magically for the Raiders and for him and for everybody involved. Just I wonder who was speculative about that. Yeah. Meanwhile, 49ers now 11-3, 1 game clear of everyone else in the NFC. They have the tiebreaker over both the Eagles and the Cowboys. The final 3 games are Ravens, Commanders, Rams. Do you think that there is anyone that can stop them from being the number 1 seed in the NFC?
It doesn't seem like it. I think the Ravens game is going to be tough, and Lamar is good, and they've got some weapons. It'd be better if they still had Keaton Mitchell, but the Ravens defense is playing well, but the 49ers just have so many players producing. Purdy's QB4, McCaffrey's RB1. I forget Ayuk is wide receiver 12, Debo wide receiver 16, or vice versa. I forget. Kittle is tight end 4. Their offensive line is playing well. They have great players at all 3 levels of the defense. They're going to be tough to beat. Right now, I think they're the favorite in the NFC, and rightfully so.
Carr was quarterback 15 when he got the hook from the Raiders last year. So it was a little bit lower than I thought, but Adams was still up there. I still maintain that was better. If I'd looked for Hollywood Brown on the 2022 list of fantasy scores, I don't think I'd find him. Didn't he miss time last year too?
I think he misses time a lot.
One of the more surprising games, Buffalo Bills hosted the Dallas Cowboys. I thought the Bills would win. I didn't think they would win 31-10. Do you think this was just kind of a letdown game for the Cowboys after getting up so big to beat the Eagles?
Sometimes you get the bear, sometimes the bear gets you. The interesting thing, though, is that the Cowboys are 3-3 when they play outside. So they're playing outside up there in Buffalo. If they have to go on the road outside in the playoffs, it could be a short playoff for them.
I think if they have to go on the road in general, it's going to be tougher. They're 3-4 away and to 7-0, won by like 40 points a game at home.
It's Pollard isn't playing fantastic this year, and the defense can be hit or miss. So as much as I am pulling for them and their fantasy assets, it feels like this will be, I could see them winning one game in the playoffs and, then getting knocked out.
It'll probably be a little bit the same. If they end up at the 5th seed, you end up with, although Tampa Bay might be better this year than they were last year with Brady, which is saying something. Meanwhile, for Buffalo, if you started Josh Allen in your fantasy playoffs, you did not get the robust scoring you were hoping for, but the Bills seem to have found some magic on the ground. James Cook now up to RB7 on the season, had 30-plus points in this one. Is this kind of a formula that can do the Bills some good as they try to work themselves back into the playoffs?
Maybe, it's weird. Since Joe Brady has taken over, there's been a bigger emphasis on the running game, and Cook has produced, and the emphasis hasn't been on, we're going to run Latavius Murray or we're going to run Ty Johnson. They're running James Cook. Cook's averaging 22 opportunities per game since Brady took over, and he scored 4 touchdowns in I think 4 games. But it feels like that, Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis have died so that Cook could live. Diggs is wide receiver 39 since he took over, and Gabe Davis is wide receiver 51. And Davis just puts up goose egg after goose egg after goose egg.
No, I had to start him this week because of Olave missing, and I just wanted to cry.
If you've been watching the sequence, though, this should have been a big game for Davis. It's like 0-20, 0-20, 0-20.
Well, they only completed 7 passes in the game. They didn't really have to throw the ball. I like Josh Allen at the podium. So he felt like the kid in the group project who didn't contribute anything and just took his A. Sunday Night Football. The Ravens traveled to battle the Jaguars. Jaguars got their 3rd straight loss, 23-7. Dennis, the Jaguars now 8-6, tied in a 3-way tie atop their own division. Trevor Lawrence went into the concussion protocol. Zay Jones is injured, looking like he will miss. Are they in trouble?
Being down Kirk and now Zay Jones is injured again. He'd been playing banged up. He had a big old brace on his knee. Travis Etienne must have been watching some college football and put his brother's name in there. Travis is in the middle of the pack. I was talking about Lawrence. No, that's who I was talking about. Back to the receivers. Sorry, I got lost in my notes. That's what I get for using only first names. Zay Jones provides something to this team that helps. He's a lubricant, it seems. He's a catalyst. He helps other players do well. And so him being down, and especially with Kirk out, I don't think that Jamal Agnew is going to provide that. Who else are we looking at here?
Parker Washington. The ghost of Calvin Ridley, who just comes back to haunt our fantasy dreams.
I think, if I can get Ridley out of my lineup next week, I think I might be doing that.
I've actually taken him out in a couple of spots because it's just not happening.
Lawrence, on the other hand, he's been the middle of the pack in a lot of metrics: completion percentage, touchdowns, touchdown percentage, yards per attempt. He needs to take another step, and I don't know if he's going to take it this year. So while they may hold on and either win the division because it's a weak division or win a wild card because it's a weak division, he needs to really step up and take that next step. we all thought Peterson was the guy that could get that out of him. It hasn't looked great this year.
Meanwhile, for the Ravens, they get the win. They're still the number 1 seed in the AFC, but they lost Keaton Mitchell, their kind of explosive running back there, torn ACL, out for the year. How big of a loss is that?
Well, he was settling into a really nice 9 to 12 touch role and providing a ton of explosiveness, breaking off big runs, breaking off nice receptions. The Ravens have said they're going to bring up Melvin Gordon, so that feels like a 1-for-1 swap, doesn't it? But I'd expect that Gus Edwards and Justice Hill are going to get 90% of the touches, and Melvin is just going to be there to just in case one of those get hurt. So this might be a good opportunity if you were riding that Gus Edwards touchdown train here mid-season. We may be getting ready to see it leave the station again.
Yeah, I mean, he got a touchdown, so that was encouraging, and it's not like they have a whole lot else going on. I am not putting any faith in Melvin Gordon, and you should not either. Monday Night Football saw the Eagles travel to battle the Seattle Seahawks, and they got the loss 20-17. 3 straight losses now for the Eagles. They have a somewhat favorable schedule to close the season, but is this a bad sign for them? It feels like more than a blip.
Their rush defense has really fallen apart. They gave up 1 game with over 100 yards rushing in their first 9 games. And since the bye, they've allowed 5 straight 100-yard over 100-yard rushing games, with yesterday at 100 yards even being the lowest. The rest of them are like 120, 130, 150. They were giving up big chunks on the ground. The offense has outgained the opponent in just one of their last 7 games. So overall, and there's been a lot of talk about, is Jalen Hurts banged up? Is his knee banged up? And, he's downplayed it. But A.J. Brown hasn't been putting up those monster numbers. I know Dallas Goedert missed a significant amount of time. So maybe they get healthy here right at the playoff push, and they're able to get in there. But the defense has to get their act together.
Meanwhile, for Seattle, we've seen, kind of a weird split in the backfield for a while and not a lot of production. This one, very clear cut for Kenneth Walker, 19 carries, 86 yards, gets the touchdown, caught a couple of passes, only 4 carries for Charbonnet. Is this an encouraging sign going into the fantasy playoffs?
Yeah, as long as Pete doesn't randomly decide to give Charbonnet 60% of the touches. I mean, Pete Carroll's a real wild card, and maybe he's just because I think he's the oldest coach in the league, and because he looks so healthy and fresh, maybe we're underestimating just how good his memory is and who he remembers is on his team sometimes. But Walker, he's the low-end RB2 with upside. If he has games where he gets 3 targets or 4 targets to go along with 15 carries, with his explosiveness, he can put up games like he did yesterday. And he's a powerful runner, 5'9", 212, 215 pounds. He's a powerful runner and very fast. His Achilles heel has always been that there are times when there's a hole that he can get 6 yards that he thinks he can bounce outside, and he ends up getting a 0.
Well, that'll do it for recapping Week 15. But Week 16 gets started on Thursday night with a pretty important game for the NFC playoff picture. The 7-7 Saints at the 7-7 Los Angeles Rams. I like what the Rams have going on. I am taking them in that game. But Dennis, how do you feel about that matchup?
So the the Saints are 4-3 in their last 7 games. The Saints really need to get Chris Olave and Taysom Hill back involved the way they were earlier in the season. And if they're not going to be able to do that, then it just becomes the Alvin Kamara show. And I think the Rams can handle that. The Rams have won 4 of their last 5. And if Puka and Kupp and Kyren are staying healthy, this team can continue their run. Well, they're not going to overtake San Francisco for sure. But
I think San Fran actually already officially won the division.
Yeah. So, but they have a shot at being a wild card team.
Yeah, and it's It does feel pretty wide open there in the NFC. Well, that'll do it for us today. If you are looking for something to fill up the rest of your night or your Wednesday, Dennis, what can the people do?
Well, I'm picking the Rams in that game. You?
Yeah, I took the Rams.
Okay. They can go ahead and hit that subscribe button, leave us a rating and a review, download. We're coming at you twice a week, in season, off season. We're here virtually every week.
We will be back with the rest of the preview of week 16 in the NFL. Can you believe we have already made it another week where you're going to have 3 consecutive days of football, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, just to make those family times more memorable. We will see you guys on Friday. Until then, have a great week.